Hello there, and welcome to the Time Machine with Trish and Mike. I'm Mike.
And I'm Trish.
And we're glad you're with us once again. Hello, Trish. How are you?
I am great. Mike, how about you?
I am good. I'm excited. Next week, we're doing things a little bit differently here on the show. We're going to have a special in honor of Canada Day and our Independence Day coming up next week. We're going to have a special episode where we will be looking at some of the differences between the U.S. and Canada. So, of course, if anyone listening or watching us on YouTube is curious about something, because there are differences between our countries, obviously, not just geographical differences and stuff, but even just common routine daily life thing. Like I know we've discussed before about cereal, how we have a whole aisle full and you have like 8 choices of cereal or something.
at least in Edmonton. Maybe if we have our Torontonians, because we were talking about how maybe they're likely the most Americanized city.
Right. Or maybe I would guess it would probably be Toronto, probably the most. Yeah. But just anything you've ever kind of been curious about. Don't just assume that, Canada is America and America is Canada. We're quite different in some ways. And so we'll be having a fun look at that. If you go back to one of our episodes towards the beginning, we did a whole pronunciation of cities that was quite entertaining. Maybe we'll see if we could do a round 2 perhaps of that
about
as well.
All over the whole countries.
Yes, that sounds like you know what, we'll just go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. I think we will do a round 2 on that next week for you. But if you've got something,
we need people to send us some suggestions then too.
Yes, so send us suggestions, shoot us an email, Time Machine with Trish and Mike at gmail.com, or our Instagram page. Send us a DM on there. We'll throughout the coming week we will have posts up and stories, so just reply to any of them and we'll get a list together and we'll do all that next week.
As I tell my students, there are no stupid questions, so fire them away.
There are no stupid questions, but there are stupid people anyway. But you're not, because you listen to our show, so that makes you smarter than the average bear. They have bears in Canada, right? Of course they do.
Lots of bears.
Yes.
Lots of.
Yeah, that's right. Vancouver was the Grizzlies when Vancouver had the NBA team. So yeah.
Yes, yeah. We have Grizzlies, but brown bears, black bears, spirit bears.
Then again, Toronto has the Raptors, and I don't think there's a Raptor running around Toronto. But
no.
Although they played their season in Tampa this year because of
that's true. They did, yeah.
COVID, but. Anyway,
won't it be nice to one day just have an episode and we won't have to talk about COVID at all?
I think we're getting there. I know you just had your second shot last week. And
I did.
You survived. And
Canada Day, I'll be fully vaxxed. Woo!
Yes, and so I got my second dose on Star Wars Day, so I've been good now for about 6 weeks or so.
That's awesome.
Fully vaxxed. So we're getting there.
We're getting there. Now we just need the border to open up because our government's extended it to July 21st.
I thought it was July 26th. Was it 21st? No. I don't know. I saw you mentioning it the other day.
It's the 21st.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, another 30 days.
Getting closer, though. It's got to be getting closer. One thing, though, that is closer is, of course, summertime is now finally here, which doesn't make much of a difference in Florida because it's always hot. But
right.
Summertime, people like to go on vacation. They like to go to theme parks. And the Coney Island cyclone opened on June 26, 1927. So, of course, Coney...
You wouldn't think it's that old.
You wouldn't. And it's funny because as I was doing my research for this, I was thinking, because I looked it up, because, I've heard of it, but I've never, I actually went on YouTube and I did an onboard, POV, point of view writer thing.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, whatever, ride this, because I'm not a big coaster guy. I don't do the crazy stuff, like the flips and the
I don't do any of it.
Barrel rolls. But I'm like, I would ride this. And then I started thinking, this is like 100-year-old roller coaster. I don't know if I really want to ride it or not. Of course, obviously parts of it have been, replaced and repaired. So it's not like 100-year-old wood anymore. But
Is it still wooden?
yeah, it's still a wooden,
Oh
old
my
school wooden
goodness.
roller coaster. It reaches a maximum speed. I didn't realize this of 60 miles an hour. I did not realize it went that fast.
Yeah, that's
So
pretty fast.
that's almost 100 kilometers an hour for you.
Yeah, if not pushing like 110.
Yeah, it's up there, y'all. Anyway, what I didn't, this was another thing I didn't know. Of course, now Disney is the largest amusement area in the United States at this point because, they've outgrown, surpassed other areas. But up until World War II, Coney Island was actually the largest amusement area
In the United States?
in the United States. Yeah.
Wow.
There were 3 amusement parks on Coney Island at that point in time.
You only ever think of like just Coney Island and like the one.
Right. Like you didn't even realize. Yeah, exactly. And in fact, so the Cyclone is located at Luna Park in Coney Island. Now, this Luna Park is not to be confused with the original Luna Park. There was Luna Park, Dreamland, and Steeplechase Park, and other smaller independent amusement parks as well. So this was like a whole big happening. When the ride was built, it cost about $175,000 to build.
Which is a lot of money.
Yeah,
for like 1927.
I know, right? And how much do you think it costs to ride?
Math questions.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go with something like 75 cents.
25 cents.
Dang it!
Which would be equivalent to about $3.72 now, which
is real cheap.
Which is real cheap. So, of course, what do you think the current price is to ride it? Spoiler, it's not $3.72.
No, I would not expect so. I'm going to say like $18.
10.
Okay, so 18 Canadian.
Yeah, probably. $10 for a ride that lasts about a minute and a half, minute 40.
That's a good chunk of change for under 2 minutes of fun.
Right? Like, can I ride twice for that? I mean, I don't know.
That sounds like an utter nightmare for me. Like, I hate amusement rides. I hate wasting money. Like, this would be not a good thing for me.
I mean, that's like $300 an hour if you wanted to ride that thing for an hour.
Oh my gosh, it'd be so sick.
Well, I know somebody, well, I don't know somebody, but I could tell you about somebody who has ridden it a whole lot.
Well, who's this?
Michael Boodley in 1975 set the record for most consecutive trips on the Cyclone. He rode it 1,001 times over a 45-hour period.
What?
Yes.
Why? And how sick was he afterwards?
I have no idea, but I can tell you that 2 years later, 19-year-old Richard Rodriguez broke the record riding the coaster. It actually doesn't say how many times he rode it, but he rode it for 104 hours. He would take short bathroom breaks between rides and would actually eat hot dogs, M&Ms, and drink shakes on the ride itself.
What? That sounds like such a lawsuit waiting to happen. Like you would choke while riding it.
Well, forget that. Like if I'm next to you and you hit the bump the wrong way on the roller coaster, your milkshake goes flying and hits me. Like
that's terrible. You just get like binged by an M&M.
Right? It's funny. A few weeks ago, the new Jurassic Park roller coaster opened at Universal Studios here in Florida, and there was actually these. I will refrain from calling them what I'd like to call them, but these kids were throwing ice at people on this roller coaster. Like,
yeah, but how do you get on the ride with the ice? Like,
no. They were in the park, like on normal ground.
Oh, they were on the ground. Oh, at the people on the ride.
Yeah, it's like,
oh,
that's not cool. Do not do that. So but I'm just imagining getting pinged with, an M&M going 60 miles an hour. That would not. I mean, it wouldn't kill you, but that could like screw your eye up. If it hit you in the eye.
Get a pretty big welt.
Yeah,
that's terrible.
Yeah, it is. Charles Lindbergh actually rode it a couple of years after it opened and said it was greater than flying an airplane.
Really?
Yes, I found that interesting.
Someone who's like devoted a good chunk of their life to flying would say that. That's kind of impressive.
Like he's qualified to make that statement.
True.
So yeah. So
cool. Would you go on it? You would go on it. You said when you watched the video.
Yeah, I would go on it because it doesn't flip. It doesn't go upside down. So it's just a lot of up and down type thing. So I would go on it.
I
I
will,
would
when we
like to rent
go
it.
to, New York State for our visit that we keep talking about planning now that we've talked about the Statue of Liberty and the Brooklyn Bridge
Mhm.
in previous episodes. I will hold your stuff, Mike, and you can go on the roller coaster for both of us. You can go
Okay,
twice.
I can go twice. All right.
I'll pay for your ticket.
Okay. All right. Well, we can make
But
that happen.
it'll only be in like, Loonies and
There you go. Yeah. Now I want to watch Looney Tunes because you said that.
Sorry.
It reminds me, we got Space Jam 2 coming out in a couple weeks, and nobody
Oh,
has
yeah.
sent me an essay saying that movie should happen. So I
Yeah,
feel
no,
I feel that people are with me that this movie
should
is
not be made or
completely
should not be.
unnecessary.
Yeah.
Yes, all of it. I'm seeing stuff in stores now for it. So I'm
Well,
like,
and they keep redoing movies that nobody wants, whereas they're totally ignoring things like oh, now of course I'm going to forget the name of it.
just have an
What's
original idea, people.
Well, an
You know?
original idea would be great, but Treasure Planet, why is that not live action?
Yeah,
Right? Like that's
that would be a great
specifically
Disney movie.
designed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
No,
mean,
I
the
agree.
cartoon's awesome. Although I didn't realize it was Matt Damon until like the end of the movie. And then I read the credits and I was like, really? I felt like such an idiot.
One last thing, real quick, on the cyclone, I forgot to mention. It is considered an irreplaceable structure since a timber-supported coaster can no longer be built under modern New York City building codes. So,
So if
like,
it goes
yeah,
under, that's it. They can't rebuild it.
right. Like, it's not like if they came in and said, okay, we're going to do something else with this land, and somebody decided they want to recreate, the Cyclone 2 or something in a different part of the city.
They can't.
They wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, I'm never going to say never, because you could get, exemptions and special permits and what have you, but it's, you couldn't just decide to do it today and be like, oh, I'm going to build it. No.
Too many rules and laws. Just let us be wild, New York State. Come on.
But, yeah, of course, summertime also means another type of cyclone, which is hurricane season, but
Hurricane season. Yeah, right. Because cyclone and hurricanes are the same. It just depends on which
what
part of the world you're in.
correct.
Right.
Hurricanes, cyclones, typhoons, they're literally all the same. It just matters where you're at. And sometimes these things just spin out on the open ocean and don't hurt anybody on land, thankfully.
Yep.
But if you're out on a boat, it's
Like
important
our
that
next
they're
story.
there. Yeah.
This is true. We're going to be talking about Joshua Slocum. He is going to be the first person to sail single-handedly around the world solo. So he's born February 20th, 1844, and he is assumed to have died on or shortly after November 14th, 1909. So right away, you realize our story is going to have a little bit of a mystery. So Slocum's actually from my area of the woods. He was born in Annapolis County in Nova Scotia. So it's probably where I grew up. It's about, I don't know, like 4 hours away from me, 5 hours. He's going to be the fifth of 11 children. And his father actually left the United States shortly after 1780 because of his opposition to the American War for Independence. They were Quakers. So under the Loyalist migration to Nova Scotia, his family is granted 500 acres, or about 2 kilometers squared of farmland in the Annapolis Valley, which was really common. Actually, a lot of Americans would come up because of this Loyalist migration deal. It's like, oh, if you want to defend Britain, you could get free land. So around my area of the woods, it's actually quite a few names are American names. So kind of interesting. Now, the father's super strict, and he made boots for local sailors. His grandfather is going to be the local lighthouse keeper. And Joshua hates this life altogether. He wants to run away and spend his life at sea. So at 14, he succeeds and joins a ship as a cabin boy and a cook. And then by the age of 18, he earned the title of second mate. Now, here's another interesting American connection, right? So originally American, he's going to go to San Francisco and settle and reclaim his American citizenship. So he bounced back and forth between our two countries. And after a period of salmon fishing and fur trading in the Oregon Territory in the Northwest, he's going to return as a schooner in a trade between San Francisco and Seattle. I guess there was kind of like a run between both states.
That makes sense because, they're two of the larger cities out on the West Coast.
Yeah. So he's running back and forth. He's getting really famous for his pilot. It's piloting, sailing, right? Being the captain. he's going to start going from San Francisco to Australia and then back around via Alaska. So he starts going all over the place.
That's a little bit of a longer trip than to Seattle.
Yeah. So the trading starts to expand. He starts to get more, like I said, famous people start hiring him out and things like that. He's going to eventually go to Sydney, Australia. Right. So as he's doing these San Francisco to Australia and then back through Alaska, he ends up meeting a woman there. And in a month's time, Christmas 1870, he meets, courts, and marries a young woman named Virginia Albertine Walker. So I can only imagine for these two families, like within a month, 4 weeks, that they get married. And she actually joins him and they live most of their life until her death, sailing around the world and doing all this kind of crazy stuff. They have 7 children, all born at sea. 4 children are going to survive to adulthood, right? So already a very interesting life. And we're not even at the part where he starts sailing around the world by himself. Right. He's going to be shipwrecked a few times. Once they get abandoned and shipwrecked, there's outbreaks of smallpox and mutinies and pirates. His wife dies at sea. At 42, he's going to go on to marry another lady, his 24-year-old cousin, Henrietta Heady, in 1886. And then she, too, is going to join him at sea like his first wife. But she wasn't really up for it. And so eventually she, after getting stranded in Brazil and shipwrecked, and they have to build a boat from scratch and then sail 55 days back to the U.S., she's like, you know what? I think I'm done.
Yeah. This is not what I signed up for.
Not what I signed up for. So you're just like, how does so much happen to one person in their life? Finally, at the age of 51, in 1895, he is going to plan and start the most thrilling adventure, which is his solo sail around the world. He starts in Boston, Massachusetts, and then he goes up and visits family before taking off on July 3rd, 1895 for this trip.
Which let that be motivation for anyone listening to this. This guy didn't achieve his greatest thing until he was 51.
That's
so
right.
It doesn't matter how old you are. It's never too late. If you are still breathing, you still have an opportunity. Continue. That's your motivational moment.
That's your motivation now. Be like Joshua. So it's going to take him 3 years to get around. And he goes, like, it's an amazing adventure. Like we could spend a whole episode just on the one trip, going through the Suez Canal and going through the Straits of Magellan. Makes the full Magellan people.
Yes. It's a reference to a few episodes back when we talked about Magellan. If you want to know what the full Magellan is, go back and listen to it.
Back and check that out. He's going to go around the Cape of Good Hope before finally heading back to North America. And so he returns to Newport, Rhode Island, after having circumnavigate the world. But what's unfortunate is no one really cares when he comes back. It's first person to do this all by himself. But the Spanish-American War had begun 2 months earlier, and that was all that was in the headlines. No one cared about him coming back, which was really unfortunate, right? You think you spent 3 years of your life devoting to this epic adventure.
And nobody cared.
Nobody cares.
That's unfortunate. What
did happen? We care. What did happen, though, is he published an account of his epic voyage, and you can read it, called Sailing Alone Around the World in 1899.
That's a good title for the book.
It is a good title for the book.
I mean, I like books that kind of tell me what it is. I don't have to, I know what I'm signed up for. Mm-hmm. If you go Harry Potter, okay, well, what is Harry Potter? Who is a Harry Potter?
Maybe he's a Potter.
Does he make pots, and does he have a long beard? I don't know.
We have no idea. But sailing alone around the world, you know what you're getting into.
It's like Snakes on a Plane with Samuel L. Jackson.
I've never seen
that movie. Okay, this movie's about some snakes on a plane, and Samuel L. Jackson's in it. So
there's going to be some.
It's going to be something.
Bad words.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny though. There's a quote from one reviewer claiming this is the quote, you should go and read this book. Boys who do not like this book ought to be drowned at once. Well, a little epic there.
That's a little harsh.
You're like, okay. What I thought was interesting, though, then he ends up, kind of riding the wave of fame on this book because it becomes really, really famous amongst sailors and adventurers. But he starts to run into some expenses as the book sales die down. And so he decides at 65 that he's going to go and sail from Vineyard Haven, Massachusetts for the West Indies. On one of his, he would go off on these like winter voyages to warmer places.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. And he's planning a new adventure into South America. He wanted to go and explore down along the South America, going up into the rivers and things like that. And in July 1910, his wife informed the newspapers that she believed he was lost at sea. So like almost a year, it's like, 10 months? And despite being an experienced mariner, he actually never learned to swim. And he thought learning to swim was useless.
Okay, that would have to be like a prerequisite to be a captain of a ship like that. Like,
it's like you have spent your entire life from the age of 14, if not earlier, because obviously he sailed up to Canada from the United States before 14. You spent your whole life living around the sea, on the sea. Your children were born on the sea. You're like, learning to swim's useless. Like, are you kidding me?
I mean, if you don't know how, it's fine, but you need a life jacket.
You would think so. I mean, my mom grew up where my grandfather, they lived right on the ocean, right? My grandfather would just throw them in and be like, you got to learn. He thought learning to swim was extremely important. But 1924, the age of 80, he's going to be finally declared legally dead.
No.
Yeah. Took off 1909. His wife's like, I think he's lost at sea, 1910. The police don't make it legal until 1924.
Well, at least they finally got closure.
I guess so. But that poor, I wonder, like, is she waiting on,
well, she's dead now too.
Right?
But
well, she's dead too, but I mean, during that time, right? As a wife, you can't claim any
things until they're legally dead, right?
Yeah.
And those things take a while. Yeah.
So I'm assuming the war got in the way and all that jazz.
Yeah. I'm sure she had a trip to Coney Island planned.
Maybe. But I mean, we have no idea where he ended up or what happened to him. There's a total mystery on like when he actually died. So I don't know. Kind of interesting. It would be really cool if someone somewhere found any evidence of where he was or his boat or anything like that. That'd be cool.
Maybe one day, but you got to figure if it's been this long, there's no telling where in the ocean it could be.
Well, and really, unless you're in colder waters, your boat's going to just disintegrate, right? And like up in the Arctic, they found Sir John Franklin's boat. But that's because in the frigid cold waters of the Arctic, the boats were preserved. So if he's going somewhere tropical, all evidence of that boat's probably toast.
Probably. But it's unfortunate.
Yeah. I just love a good mystery, though.
Yeah. And it will remain a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
But congratulations for circumnavigating the globe.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
Pretty crazy. You have a story, though, about circumnavigating something else.
Yes, and it is quite possibly crazier because it is on June 28th, 1997, Holyfield-Tyson 2. This is the iconic, infamous, legendary, memorable, whatever you want to call it, rematch.
Disgusting.
Yeah, we call it that too. Between Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson, which, Mike Tyson was disqualified for biting off a piece of Evander Holyfield's ear. This is
infamous.
So this was a rematch from the previous November when they had the first fight in which Evander Holyfield won. So this was the big hyped rematch and everything. And of course, it was in Las Vegas because that's where a lot of the big fights are. In the first fight, Holyfield wins in the 11th round after a referee stoppage. So Holyfield beat Tyson. So now we're getting the big rematch 7 months later. And so the match begins. And again, Holyfield is dominating Tyson. And 32 seconds into the second round, Holyfield ducks a punch from Tyson. And in doing so, headbutts him, which is a no-no in boxing. You can't headbutt somebody. And it opens up a cut over Tyson's eye. And in the previous fight, Tyson was complaining that Holyfield was headbutting him a lot. So as the third round starts to begin, Tyson comes out of his corner without his mouthpiece in. And Judge Mills Lane, the referee, who you might remember as being, the judge, he had the, like all these people's courtroom shows. He had one for a while. He was, he's the referee. Remember the old Celebrity Deathmatch on MTV?
Oh, yeah.
He was the referee for all those.
Oh, okay.
That was him. Let's get it on. That was him. So he orders Tyson back to his corner to put his mouthpiece in. So he goes, puts it in, and eventually he winds up spitting it out. They get kind of tangled up, and Holyfield kind of has Tyson. They're kind of, how you see boxers sometimes where they almost look like they get close. They almost look like they're hugging because they're trying to stop the other one from being able to punch them. And Tyson put his head over and bit part of Holyfield's right ear and spit it out in the ring.
And so that picture in the newspapers. So so awful.
Holyfield starts jumping around, and he pushes Tyson away. At that point, the referee calls timeout to see what the deal is, and Tyson pushes Holyfield as he's walking away, and so the referee gets in the middle. He has to split it up and everything, and he sees his ear bleeding. So they kind of stop the fight for a few minutes to figure out what they wanted to do. And Lane originally wanted to disqualify Tyson because he was like, wait, now what? But he kind of conferred with the ringside doctors that Holyfield could continue. And he said he was going to deduct 2 points from Tyson, which, you use the point system if boxing, if you go to a draw, and, or the time limit, you get to the end of the rounds.
Right.
Decided the match would continue. And he explained the decision to Tyson, saying that, they think it was part of Tyson was saying, oh, it was a punch. I didn't bite him or whatever. And the referee was like, BS. I know what you did, but don't do it again. So the fight resumes in the third round. And again, kind of same situation. Now he starts to bite the left ear. Holyfield's able to escape. This one just kind of scratched his ear a little bit. He didn't actually get a chunk.
Trying to give him a matching set is all.
I guess. So at this point, the referee steps in, he splits them up, sends them to their corners, and then winds up, once he realizes he bit him again, disqualification, the fight is over.
Right.
And
did they not at any point, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but wouldn't he want to have that part of his ear reattached?
Well,
would that just be an impossibility?
It was just like the cartilage on the outside, so it's not anything really structural.
Oh, I thought it was like the lobe.
No, it was like part of the top part. I mean, yeah, you'd want it, but
I guess I don't think you can save that piece of ear. I don't know.
Ears are not a common thing that you have injuries to. Yeah, so
he definitely circumnavigated his head, though.
He did, because
right to left.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
So Tyson winds up being fined $3 million and have to perform community service, and his boxing license was revoked for about a year.
Yeah, but clearly this was his plan. He was frustrated and gonna do something, which is why he started that round without the mouthpiece.
Right. He was,
I'm
tired of you headbutting me. I'm gonna
nip you.
Yeah, exactly. But all's well that ends well. That when they both wound up retiring from boxing and have become good friends, and they are still to this day.
I don't think I could become. I mean, there's one thing with like a little nibble from a friend, I guess, or a significant other. There's something totally different than actively, aggressively biting your ear off.
Yeah.
I couldn't be friends with that person. He's a better person than I am.
But yeah, so that happened. That was a thing.
That was a thing. Yeah. Crazy. The 90s were crazy.
Yes, they were. I want to go back and relive them.
It's we experienced a lot of crazy stuff growing up.
we really did.
Weird.
There are stories that will be told for generations. Wait, what now?
So funny.
Not the most civilized.
Not the most civilized thing. No. Which is going to bring us into our final story for our episode is June 29th, 1989. The new Canadian Museum of Civilization is going to open in Hull, Quebec. And the two main buildings are actually going to be designed by a very famous Metis architect, Douglas Cardinal. So I've actually been to this museum. It is phenomenal. In 2013, it was actually renamed the Canadian Museum of History, but I prefer, Museum of Civilization. And Gatineau Hall is just across the Ottawa River. So if you ever go to Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada.
Not Toronto.
Not Toronto.
A lot of people think it's Toronto.
No. You can walk across. There's a bridge, obviously, that connects both places, and you can just walk across and go and visit it. And they used to have certain days that were free. So I spent a summer in Ottawa. Oh my goodness, back in 2004. And a lot of us would go to Gatineau Hall because in Quebec, the drinking age is 18. And in Ottawa, Ontario, its drinking age is 19. So my friends and I would walk across the bridge over to Gatineau. But it is a beautiful building. You can see it from the Canadian Parliament, and it's kind of all rounded. So Douglas Cardinal is very, very famous for this, like not having corners in his designs and kind of mimicking nature. So like the flow of rivers or things like that. It's beautiful. It welcomes
he builds the buildings to go along with, he doesn't create a building. So like if there's, say there's a curve in the road, the building may have a curve to it.
So it's all about mimicking just nature. So curves of rivers and
I got you now.
Natural landscapes. So the church that I used to attend here was one of his early designs, and it's same thing. There's no corners. It's all rounded, and there is a spiritual purpose to that as well. So it's mimicking landscape, but also in many Indigenous cultures, if it's rounded corners, it's like the spirits can't collect.
They don't have,
Yeah. So there's kind of like a spiritual aspect to it as well. But the museum welcomes 1.2 million visitors each year. It is actually the most visited museum in Canada. And it has roots stretching back to 1856. So already back in 1856, they were starting to collect artifacts and having a designated spot in this museum. And it is one of our oldest public institutions in Canada. And it has about 20,000 years of human history that is presented. And if you're interested, anyone online, there's about 218,000 artifacts available online that you can go and check out. Yeah. And it's a big building. It's 4 levels, 25,000 square meters of display space. So really, really nice. You can spend a whole day there. It's one of my favorite places that I've ever, like museums in Canada that I've gone to.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty cool place to go.
Mm-hmm. And with Douglas Cardinal, so I mentioned that he was a Métis. There is Métis in America, but I don't know if you are familiar with that term, Mike.
No, but it's possible we call it something else, maybe.
Well, and it's a mixed Indigenous and European heritage.
Okay.
But it's a specific cultural grouping as well. It's one of the 3 recognized Aboriginal peoples in Canada. So we have our First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. They're separated and there's different laws.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Probably
kind of like how we have different tribes here. Yeah. We have, the Seminole tribe, the Cherokee tribe, the, Navajo.
And so for us, all Navajo. The tribes would be collected under like Indigenous or First Nations.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Inuit is just like separate and Métis is separate. There's different qualifications to being involved in those groups.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But Douglas Joseph Cardinal, who's born March 7th, 1934, he is of this Métis heritage. So they're actually in their majority, you can be anywhere in Canada, but primarily their ancestral land is accepted as the 3 prairie provinces in Canada. So Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, with parts of Ontario, British Columbia, and the Northwest Territories, and then northern United States. So a lot of blending in the early days of Canada and U.S. history when these individuals would go down into like Montana. So you might have people who identify as Métis in those northern states, and they speak an ancestral language, which is known as Mischief. And their history and political tradition and all that is very unique. It's such an interesting group of people. And again, you could spend a whole episode talking about their founder and the history of just this people. But Joseph Cardinal is a Métis, and he's based out of Ottawa now, but he's originally from my province. So he was born in Calgary, Alberta. And like I said, he follows those forms of his art, his designs mimicking like landscapes and nature. What I found interesting is that although he's known as one of Canada's most influential architects, he's also really well known in the United States. So if you're involved in architecture, I guess you might know this about him. But he designed the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. in 1998.
Cool.
Yeah, which is another, I would love to go to Washington, D.C.
A lot of museums there.
Mm-hmm.
That's another place you could easily spend a week and still have stuff left to do.
That would be so nice. And I think it's interesting that It mentions that although he always identified as Métis and Indigenous, it wasn't until he actually spent time in Texas and was interacting with the Indigenous people there that he really started to celebrate his own faith and culture and wear more traditional clothing and incorporate more of the Métis and Indigenous aspects into his designs. I was like, oh, that's such a neat story for our show, like this unique blend of Canada and US. And
Yeah. No, I
thought
agree.
that was cool.
That was cool.
But yeah, I do love his work. Like if you're into architecture, you should definitely check him out because his designs are just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Check it out. And be sure to check our show out next week for the special US Canada episode.
Great.
Yes. And tell them how they can be a part of it, Trish.
So you can leave us a voicemail on the Anchor. Well, I guess it's Anchor app, Anchor website. You can go to the website.
I don't know. Can you?
You don't need the app.
Do you have to have the app? I don't know.
I don't think so. Check it out. Go check out Anchor. It's a good program anyway. It's kind of interesting.
If you can't do it on the website, download the app.
Yeah. You can reach us on Instagram, the Time Machine with Trish and Mike. You can find us on YouTube if you pop it into the Google, subscribe, hit like, and make us legitimized on there. You can drop us an email at the Time Machine with Trish and Mike at gmail.com. Lots of ways to contact us.
Yes. And do that because we want to hear from you, especially for next week.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, we'll catch you next week right here on the Time Machine.